Well, welcome everyone. I'm so grateful that you're joining today and excited to cover again kind of this topic of the spike protein. That's why I called it 2.0. As QT advances and everything that we learn, we find that we're learning more and more information. And so it's kind of like, okay, let's develop more information. So, and share it with you. So we've got some codes that we can share with you at the end that I can send to you. And so we're just excited to kind of learn more. So I'm Jody Colegrove, and I'm a holistic health practitioner with Quantum Techniques. And we do our best to help you get answers and to find out, what you're having an issue with, what you can do to solve it, and then have energy to be able to take care of it and live in peace, knowing you're headed in the right direction, getting back your health and happiness. So Steve, I want to introduce you. This is Steve Daniel, the founder of Quantum Techniques. And so thanks for helping us learn more about what we're doing.
Sure. It's interesting. We normally do an annual training in quantum techniques with our practitioners. This year, we're going to do two at least because there's so much new information we're getting. So we'll go into that. Jody, you did say there was a couple of questions. If you want to tell me what those are, because they may weave in with what I'm going to share.
Okay, sure. All right. So the first question that was submitted by Brenda, she asked, how can we use QT to counteract the effects of the venom?
Of the venom?
Venom. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the second question was submitted by Miriam, and it says she would like to discuss the subject of infertility and the widespread since COVID affecting males and females and what we can do to clear it.
Okay.
So appreciate those questions. And if you guys ever have questions, let me know. You can send them to me at jody@quantumtechniques.com and we can cover those. Or you can add, if you're live, you can ask them here.
Well, let's talk about spike proteins to start with. And, spike proteins are a little bit like a nasty virus. They're the gift that keeps on giving. I got spike proteins from, and I never had, anything to put it in my body intentionally, but I was around people, not a lot. My daughters weren't, were not vaccinated, but I was around people in medical settings like dental work and labs. And that's ultimately where I caught COVID. And so I think you can possibly, I don't know this for sure, get spike proteins not having had COVID, but from shedding. So I don't know that for sure. But I do know there are 1,300 spike proteins that come off COVID. There's also, we talked last time, some that come off of a vaccine that people get around 7 or 8. Since then, I realized, and this gets back to venom, that you have spike proteins off of certain kinds of bites or stings that are venomous. I had spike proteins from 3 non-medical sources, from black widow spider bites, scorpion, and jellyfish. And what was interesting is when I went into that, and see, spike proteins in some ways are kind of like the ultimate biofilm because they definitely hide mycoplasma and often protozoa. You won't find, if you clear the spike proteins for someone, you will always find mycoplasma underneath it alive. And so you've got this thing that goes in there, creates a biofilm, then other pathogens are attracted to it. It creates an inflammatory response that doesn't respond to medications well. Well, when I did the spike proteins from venom, my left elbow blew up, which is interesting because my right elbow has been the one that's been giving me trouble. But it was in a different place in that elbow. And when I tested, it's because I'd actually had 3 black widow spider bites on that elbow. And those not only had mycoplasma, but protozoa and that goes into that tissue. So I had protozoa and spike proteins in the ulnar nerves and ligaments and even a tendon. So I've had to back off some of my weight training with certain exercises until I get all the inflammation out. But, spike proteins, they're easy for us to clear. The treatment doesn't take 5 minutes. And when I clear that, then I go behind that and see what's behind it. You always have mycoplasma. Sometimes you have protozoa, other pathogens. So all I know is they cause a lot of inflammation. The other thing is they've shown that smokers did not have as bad a time with COVID as non-smokers. Well, that's because the spike proteins have an affinity for the nicotine receptor sites. And there's nicotine in broccoli and lots of foods, okay? So something I tried is getting very low dose nicotine gum, 2 milligrams. I think I bought a pack of 20 at Fry's for $7. And I wanted to see how clear were my nicotine receptor sites. Well, they weren't very clear. So I just chewed one piece of gum a day. I didn't really have any effects. It made my throat tickle, but I really didn't notice anything other than that. A little bit of throat tickle for a few minutes. And I did that for 10 days. So I just every morning just chew one piece. It did cause some die off, kicked off some more protozoa and mycoplasma off of the nicotine receptor sites. Even though they had tested clear, in general, they weren't clear off the nicotine receptor sites. So I've had some people do that. I think not all venoms, but it's like, I've had centipede stings. I didn't get spike proteins off that. I know I've had a lot more spiders, but I did, I had black widow and some other kind of spider. It wasn't brown recluse. I'm not sure what it was. And then scorpion, and then, like I say, jellyfish. So I do know we get that. I know there is a lot of discussion that, there are components of snake venom in some of the treatments for COVID, so, I don't know about that, but I know the nicotine receptor sites are helpful to clear. And it's interesting, the spike proteins and then all the inflammation that brings. It has an affinity, especially, like blood vessels, clotting, heart issues, gut issues, lung issues. So, and especially if a person was vulnerable in a particular system before, then, you get COVID and you get the man-made compounds in COVID, and then you get the spike proteins in COVID, and then you have the mycoplasma behind that. Those tissues are getting in bad shape. They get a lot of inflammation. So we're able to go through and clear that pretty quickly. I know somebody has sent me a webinar. There's I can't remember the doctor's name, but just doing all this stuff for spike proteins and all these protocols. And it's kind of like, well, you could just call QT and we can kind of clear them in 5 minutes, But so they're definitely a big inflammatory issue, and they're also a biofilm. They hide things. So that's the main thing I know, and I know how to clear them. Are there other specific questions on spike proteins themselves?
Well, I think for me, what I've noticed is that, at first they talked about a cytokine storm, and it's like what you just described is what it feels like. It's like, okay, you have this happening, but then you have it's reacting to the other, bites and stings and things you've had in your lifetime. And then underneath that, you have virus and bacteria and mycoplasma, and it's just like, wow, just like stop, And so it's that storm that we're trying to figure out how to stop and slow down. So, yeah. Let me know if someone else has a question. See, I got to make sure I've got my the chat up here so I can see it.
Well, there's a couple other things that we've had advancements in. I'm going to talk about those a little bit.
Okay.
One of them is going directly after biofilms. And it's just the new stuff. We don't have to be afraid because we're creating a new, it's not just neuroplasticity, but tissue plasticity, because it's a lot more than just neural tissue for detox and drainage for anything we find. So, the detox is pretty minimal. It's much quicker than ever before. So it's like if you clear biofilms and you might find some metals that you're clearing, anesthesias are a big one, bites are a big one, mostly old dead pathogens. Now, this is assuming you've already done the spike proteins. And again, that you might have 3 or 4 days of things healing. That's been helpful. Another thing that's been helpful, I want to see more evidence over time, because I don't have a lot of MS patients right now, but doing the same new work on the myelin sheath. And what do we notice with that? And I noticed, like for me, if I check, how clear is my myelin sheath? You want it to be 100. My brain was about 90. And since COVID, the legs were about 60. Well, I've got them both over 95 now. And I did that because I was having a little bit of floppiness with my left foot, and it tested mostly fascia. I've got an old injury there that I'm working on healing, and that's where the inflammation likes to go. But that's probably gotten about 90% better as the myelin sheath cleared. And that you clear it, but then it takes maybe a week to 10 days for the body to produce and start remyelinting that. That's another big thing we can move forward with. And it's, again, easy to do, but it affects a lot more than just cognitive and movement issues. If you think about being on the phone with somebody where you've got a very staticky line, like the line's degraded. Well, think about the myelin as electrical, and the wiring's degraded. Well, you're trying to talk, but you can't hear everything they say. You're missing some words, you're missing some data. Well, if the myelin sheath is compromised, you're going to miss data that it needs for optimal immune and detox response. So that's another thing that we've been real helpful with. And kind of the third thing that's been pretty exciting is I've always kind of asked, why do things have to heal in layers? And I know a lot of that is a belief system. I think so many of our belief systems about healing are deception, like time heals all wounds. Well, we know that's not true. Physically or emotionally, if you don't do something with it, it doesn't heal. It just kind of scabs over. And the other thing is it takes time to heal. Well, that's not really how Christ did it, So if something doesn't make sense, kind of go back to the biblical source. And so I was kind of praying and meditating on that. And I was kind of, why do things have to heal in layers? And in the place where I hear answers, I heard, well, they don't. They said, you never asked. I said, oh, you mean we can just ask? Well, yeah, you don't receive it because you haven't asked it. So I said, okay, can we do this in layers? Can we clear all the layers at once? And I've been getting a yes on that, where 60, 70, 90 layers, well, that's the equivalent of 60, 70, 90 phone calls or email sessions. Well, that's huge advancement in money saving and how quickly a person can heal. Now, so far, I've not had anybody have a big healing crisis doing that. If anything, the healing crisis is less than typical when you do one layer. And it's kind of like, if you're testing through God's eyes, we don't have to dissolve one biofilm and have the next layer show up. God can see all that. That's what Christ did. So why can't we step into that model and do something that, it's in a sense miraculous, is we can get all of it at once. So I've been doing that. You just ask how many layers are a problem, are there to this issue? Can I do all of them at once? You get all the spokes, all the organ glands and tissues involved. You get all the frequencies, toxins, pathogens, emotional frequencies all together, and you clear it. So it's like it's actually, understanding it may be complex, but actually the administration of it's fairly simple once you understand the concepts and how to do it. So we've been doing that. I've been doing that a lot in the last week. And like I say, I've not had a negative results, but I've had more than one person that I've known and worked with a long time email me back and say, wow, that was interesting, and typically huge steps forwards, very little detox. So, but that's some of the new things that we're having fun with.
Yeah, so just kind of to back up in case, people don't know. So myelin sheath is the part that covers the nerve endings. And I've always understood them to be in the brain, or that's where I think about them, but you're saying that they're throughout the body.
Yes.
So that if you have a muscle or a tendon or something like that that is sore and hurting, that could be what is the issue, is that myelin sheath in that area causing both cognitive and movement issues being restricted. And that's what we're trying to clear.
For especially like for Parkinson's, okay, or multiple sclerosis,
Right.
ALS, those are all demyelinating disorders. That's on the motor nerves. Okay. Obviously, in the brain with memory issues, you're looking at demyelinating of the brain tissue. So that's it's like, I wish we could get kids real early and clear them, when they have to get all their school, shots. I mean, that's just part of what you have to do to be in public school. Well, if you can clear them for the side effects, then I think they're going to do better with it. It's kind of like if you get a dental anesthesia and you don't, or any anesthesia, and you don't clear it, a lot of times later on, those become things that have to be cleared for chronic pain. So I think anytime you can clear something that is mandatory, or, you need it, so that, everything you put in your body has a side effect. All medications have side effects. So if you can really remove those or give those a way to detox out of the body, you're going to improve health significantly.
Got it. And what I think is interesting is when we as a group, that quantum techniques practitioners talked about this idea of being able to, well, hey, you didn't ask, to clear this. Yeah, I always think it's interesting how there's always a timing aspect that God has. And so it's like I heard two sermons, and I saw one YouTube all on the same subject, that's exactly what we covered. And it's that idea of, I always talk about the centurion said, oh, you don't need to come to my house. You can just, speak the word and my servant will be healed. And I had two sermons on that exactly. And then I also had, that idea of like, wow, I'm the one that has the little faith, and so being able to say, no, we can just ask in his name, and to be able to have the faith for that. So I think that's interesting that that's all kind of come along since even our last meeting, and just being aware of how much time we get in the way of maybe helping others or the healing, or, worrying about it or whatever.
Well, but again, we don't take it literally. We take it as religious dogma. I can do all things through Christ which strengthen me. He said, you will do greater things than I have done in my name. Well, either he's a liar, or that was just kind of religious BS, or it's kind of like, I never conceived of it that you could actually get all the layers of a problem. I mean, I thought, hey, that'd be nice. But the idea that you could do all that in one treatment, well, of course, God had to give us, how do you detox whatever you find before I do all that? I mean, there's a sequence when things happen. Healing happens instantly, but understanding the mechanisms and the tools to use, that usually happens over time. And it's kind of like, I couldn't do 67 layers if I didn't know how to create a detox field for it. it would have been too much. So it is interesting, God's timing is always the right time. He's usually a little slow in my mind, but he gets it done. He gets it done.
Well, I do think well, this has come about, all these fields for clearing neural pathways, right when it's like we have all this cytokine storm that we're trying to figure out how can we get it out of the body. And there's just been so much. It just seems like there's so many layers that have come up that we're trying to like back off. And so the timing on that is really helpful.
It's like, as a time saver now, when I'm working with somebody, even a new client, I mean, I always go and do the miasms first, but then I'll ask, how many layers are there through this issue? Do I have all the spokes, all the layers? Can a person do it? The other thing I've added is I realized I have a set of symptoms that only happen with protozoa, dead or alive. I have another set of symptoms that only happen with mycoplasma. And that's pretty much what I'm dealing with. So for me, and I can test, so I mean, it doesn't take me long to figure stuff out on myself. But I was having some leftover inflammation that would have been from those sources, but yet I couldn't find any. And so I asked a different question. Do I have certain frequencies that are out of the body, but yet the mast cell activation from those has not collapsed yet? Okay. Because, if you're killing off a mycoplasma or protozoa, you're going to have some mast cell activation. And, the one we know most about is histamine, but cytokine storm, mast cell activation, that whole inflammatory process. So it's like, what I realized is, while everything was clear, I still had six old mycoplasma that were still somehow holding up the mast cell inflammation. So I just cleared them and it went away. So now when I'm scanning somebody, it's in my intention, how many layers can I do them all? Okay. And so we do the regular thing, but also my intention is I want any additional pathogen frequencies, even if they're, quote, dead, but they're still keeping a mast cell field activated of inflammation. Let's just clear all that at once. And you can. It doesn't really take any longer, but it's just another aspect that I never thought of before, So I would say God's really blessed us this year, and I've learned to clean out my ears and listen a lot better than I used to, put it that way.
Yeah, so mast cell activation is kind of the same as inflammation. They and histamine, right. So that it's kind of like they're interchangeable. I think they're a little bit different, but it's like we're looking at that whole field. So you're saying that that's part of that layers that you're asking?
You can include that. In other words, I was doing that separately, and then I realized, well, why do it separately? That's another treatment. Can I do it all at once? The body said yes. Okay.
And then people will, what your symptoms are when you have, like you said, the protozoa and the mycoplasma, and that's going to be different for each person. Maybe it's be helpful for you to share like what yours are, so that people can say, because sometimes people go, oh, just my joints hurt when I lift weights. And it's like, well, wait a second, that can be worked on. And so instead of giving up and just saying that's the way life is, or I'm getting older or whatever. So knowing what those symptoms are, I think is really helpful, because it gives us hope and saying, wait, that doesn't have to be that way. I can change this.
Well, and I would say what I'm finding for myself is very common in other people. So, and it's interesting. Now, I know I've done a lot of work with all my clients and myself. I'm not accounting a lot of, unless it's new, virus or bacteria much anymore. And everybody's cleared on mold. Once you do that mold miasm, they can get rid of mold that they've had for years. Otherwise, you never get rid of it. That's why I say I start with the miasms. But For mycoplasma, and this is the only one that does this, I'll get itching, like my eyes itch, like if you were pollen. I'll get itching. Uh, and again, the mycoplasma was beneath the spike proteins that caused me to have blood clots with long haul COVID. And the leg that had the blood clots, they tried to put me on blood thinners that itched so bad I scratched it. And so mycoplasma will come out of that between my knee and my ankle on my right foot on the inside. And it looks like a bad rash. It really itches. Then you scratch it at night and then okay. Well, also my right forearm. Those two places, my eyes will itch, maybe my ears will itch. That's mycoplasma. I will have some water retention bloating that people often can have either a little constipation or they can have water, loose stools. Now, mycoplasma also can have some joint pain, fatigue, uh, headaches. Protozoa doesn't typically have the itching. It doesn't have the water retention. It doesn't affect the bowels as much. It does go into pain in the joints more. Now, if I say going into pain in the joints, protozoa would be maybe a 10. Mycoplasma is maybe a 5. And I know finally at 70, I've learned how to work out and not injure myself, which was not good at for many years. So if, I can muscle test, but like if my elbows are sore, I don't lift that day. Or I lift things that I don't mid my elbows, shoulder shrugs, squats, but I don't do curls or presses if I've got pain. Now that original pain that I took care of 1st of April, whatever month it was, I guess it's been about 6 weeks now, so it wasn't April. That's gone. That's never come back. That was like a tennis elbow. This new place is on the inside here. And our new practitioner, who was an exercise specialist, Clay Ward, said that's the ulnar. So I went back and it was 6 ulnar ligaments and the ulnar nerve. Well, that's a whole different pain field. That's all protozoa. That's the spike protein for the black widow bites were. So, I'm not just forcing myself to do it. I'm saying, okay, if that's that tender, I'll just do a couple. And if I exercise, like I'll do 160 crunches in different positions for the abdominals. I'll do 100 to 200, 100 to 400 deep breathing yoga squats. Well, that's my warm up. Okay. After that, if my elbows aren't hurting and I got energy, I'll go weight train. If they are, I say, well, I'll just walk my dog my 7 miles today and call it a day. Those are my light days. But I also enjoy exercise. For me, it's I actually enjoy the process of it. It's not drudgery for me. I feel great when I can work out, and I've always been that way. So the fact that at 70 I'm able to work out again and still have the most rapid muscle gain I've ever had in my life is pretty amazing. I mean, I'm up 18 pounds of muscle and I'm down 8 pounds of fat, in about 6 weeks. And it's like, I'm not sure what's going on, but I'm enjoying it, So it's fun.
So to kind of recap what I hear, so because a lot of times, I'm hoping that other people have the same questions. So a lot of times we've said that in your ligaments and joints is where you'll get bite residue and venoms, and they'll like conjugate in that area. Okay. So those are old that you might have. Well, they may be because of spike protein, but they also can be irritated because of the spike protein and shedding that you've received. But part of the mycoplasma, or it could be, I'm saying, because it could be protozoas that are in that area causing that, and mycoplasma. So it's almost like it's layered. And so when you say let's clear the layers, you're saying, can we clear all of those
Right.
above? Okay.
I typically have found the body wants to do the spike protein separate. And I think that's because I typically can't find the hidden mycoplasma at the same time. Once I clear it, I can immediately, I mean, 5 seconds later, go in and find the mycoplasma. I'm not sure why, but I can't. Okay, here's a spike protein. Let's go after the mycoplasma. I actually have to show the body. I mean, it takes an extra 2 minutes and clear it, and then I can go back and then I can find the mycoplasma. Not sure why that is yet. It's just the way it's unwrapped at this point.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, so it's kind of like I'm wanting people to realize that, it is helpful to like say, okay, hey, I've got this particular area that's an issue, okay? And then think about, what are the bites that you've had? And they don't necessarily have to be in this area. I got a blood draw in this area, and ever since then, it's been really hard to do push-ups. And it was because of that blood draw, and we cleared it, and within like 4 days, I got this huge bruise, and it was because of the stainless steel. I had a reaction to it. And it was a year before, or no, gosh, it was like 4 or 5 years before that. So that's what I'm saying. You kind of just be aware of like, okay, what has been my issues? Another one that me and Steve worked on lately, and this was taking me way back, is that I had this issue with my leg being a little bit cold, and I think you need to be aware of what memories come to mind. And so sure enough, a memory came to mind of when I was hit in the ankle by a skimboard when I was like 4 or 6, somewhere in there. Haven't thought of that in years, and it's just like,
Right.
that's odd that would come to mind right now. So part of our spiritual journey is being aware of like, hey, what comes to mind? What do you remember? What spider bite? You're like, oh yeah, I really did itch a lot, there, or this, or I got that bite, or hey, I remember when I did this. So being aware of that, because I think that helps you know what your layers are. But I think another thing that we have found is that we've also, in those layers, there can be emotions attached to that. And so being aware of what emotions you had when you got those different issues or assaults to the body is important to kind of be aware, because you're letting those go too. Is that kind of correct?
Well, I tell people, I believe that God's spirit guides what we do. So I tell my new clients this. If we're working along and something pops in your mind, that's God saying, hey, Steve's supposed to know this. And just interrupt me. And I may say, let me finish this for 5 seconds and I'll come back to it so I don't lose where I'm at. But that's how it works, because things get triggered, and trauma feels attached to injured tissue. They also attach to pathogens and vice versa. And so sometimes with that biofilm, you're dealing with the trauma field as well. We always test for spiritual attachments. First thing we ask, this feels 100% clear of spiritual deception, interference, obstruction, attack, attachments. I call that the front door. When I get all the frequencies, whether that's toxins or pathogens, I ask, are there negative emotions attached to that? And often there are, especially if you've had, it's kind of like a backdoor spiritual assault. And especially if you've suffered for something a long time, there's going to be emotions attached to it, so that you kind of clear all those together.
We had a question that came in and says, have you found that genetic stuff can turn on more, like the Medfer factors, or I'm not sure exactly what comp is, but since your work on me, I am finding I need to clear that, and something I may not know, another gene, but something like the others turn on. Okay, so she says like Medfer. I may be saying that wrong, but it's
right. Yeah,
yes,
it's MTHFR. Right.
I always saw it Medfer, but it's just
Right.
it's my dyslexia.
I find if I go in on what came in at conception, okay, man-made, usually heavy metals, also pathogens, that pretty much takes care of needing to go back and I'm not sure the value of all the genetic testing, to be honest. I don't see that usually translate into greater healing. It's a lot of information. Um, I worked with somebody recently who has been on Sudafed almost on their entire life. And so we were clearing, we're trying to get off that. And they said, oh, my dad always had this problem. Oh, well, the dad got sprayed by Agent Orange in Vietnam. And see, I didn't have that data. Now, we'd already done the miasm scan for heavy metals, and we'd already done the miasm scan for pathogens, but we went back and we said, okay, going through that, your dad's Vietnam years, what's there? We cleared that, and the next day they didn't take Sudafed for the first time in 45 years. So now I'm sure if we would have done MTHFR and other testing, it would have showed up in those, but I don't know that that would give me a way to treat it differently. Now I've read a bunch of books and I haven't read it for a while, but looked at all that stuff. And again, I haven't found most of the work on that. I mean, I know lots and lots of supplementation, and it gets very tedious doing all that. I just don't think it's supposed to work that way. So I haven't spent a tremendous amount of time studying it beyond, read all the major books a while back and just kind of launched myself in a different direction to look for answers.
And I think that's the thing that can be quite freeing, is to say, well, gosh, I got to cover everything, and realizing, know what's going to show up in the field for what I think of today is going to be helpful. And that's kind of the same as saying the word, is trusting that that's what needs to show up at the time.
And all these things are really saying, okay, I have a blocked detoxification pathway. Okay, well, God gave us a way to create new detox pathways. So do we need to know everything about every pathway? Not if they get well.
Yeah. So going back to our original questions that came in, did you have any? I think we kind of answered how to clear, venoms and bites and things like that come in.
But let me address that real quickly.
Sure.
Bites are very easy for us to clear. I've cleared at least 4 dogs that got rattlesnake bites that curled up, and the owners weren't going to try to save them, and they were fine within an hour. Real close friend of mine in Maui used to do a lot of work as a construction guy, big healthy guy. He'd get a centipede sting, and they would get him with an EpiPen and run him to the hospital because he'd swell up. And that happened when he was working on our house, so I just cleared him. And it's like, what? It was gone in 5 minutes. The reaction was gone in 5 minutes. He never had another reaction. So all you do, it's like we do everything else. Okay. Do you have all the spokes? Okay. So you've got this sting or bite. Did it have any pathogens on it? Show the body where they are. Create a new pathway so that future bites or stings have a place to go besides the problematic symptom areas. That's it. Very quick. I have taken care of people that were anaphylactic to bee stings. And well, once we treated them, they weren't anymore. I've got a lot of people that live places like Jody left, Louisiana and Missouri. I'm in Missouri and Alabama and all these places, Texas, with all these bug bites. And they used to lose treatments. I mean, they'd have to call me 2 or 3 times a week because they'd be in such bad shape from bites. Not anymore, because every time we get a bite, we find out what came in on the bite. Was this a flea, a mite, a mosquito, spider? And we create a new pathway. Sometimes, but because it got a lot of bugs, we might have to do it 4 or 5 times. They're not losing treatments anymore. They're not having the really bad itching histamine reactions anymore. So it's not what happens, is does the body have a path out of the body for whatever enters it the way it was designed to, without the resistance of the body causing an inflammatory response? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just kind of thinking for me, I don't react to bites as much, but I still have a couple pathways that are, let's say, will cause the ileocecal valve and the intrinsic nervous system to shut down when you get a bite. And so are you saying that we just need to continue to find what pathway that is to get
Right.
it to, okay.
Yeah, include that tissues in the next time, and then create a pathway that includes those.
And I think what we've also learned is sometimes you have to be real specific. Like you said, you
Right.
found this ulnar nerve. And I know you found something for me that some specific, both the outside layer, in middle layer, and the inside layer that helped clear it
Yeah.
completely.
Yeah, and I know for me with that, I had 100% of all known and unknown spokes for that elbow, but I wasn't getting better. So I said, well, I don't care how the testing is. Let me go back to my charts. What's everything in that elbow chart? Oh, yeah. Now do I have one? Oh, yeah. Yeah, we kind of glossed over those specific 6 ligaments. Okay, well, that would have been nice to know when I was treating it 4 days ago. But I mean, sometimes whether I missed it, the body just didn't show it. I don't know. But once I got it, the elbow got better.
Got it. Okay. Thanks for the clarification on that. What about the infertility? Because that is something that I know that was a concern from lots of people, especially Christine Northrup, in regards to what we've gone through impacting infertility and causing both males and females to have more of a spike protein in that fertility area.
Even before this, we did a lot with fertility, and Jody's an example of that,
Yeah.
you know, and I've seen this with other people, and for Jody, why don't you just tell them what we did in your case?
So we had tried to get pregnant, and we did the IUI, which is they kind of call the poor man's IVF. But then we did several of the IVF, and still didn't take. And so, and I had been working with Steve to try to get rid of any of those bad side effects from any of the heavy metals and chemicals and stuff like that that were building up falsely the estrogen and progesterone. And so when we sat down with the doctor at the end and said, okay, well, what's going on? He said, well, what's happening is the egg is not attaching on the 26th day. So we went and said, okay, well, what happens on the 26th day? Well, I think it was luteinizing hormone gets released. And so that was blocked. And so I said, okay, well, why was that blocked? Well, we found that I had taken wild yam as a herb internally. Now, a lot of times women take wild yam progesterone cream and it's on the outside, but taking on the inside is a contraceptive, and it worked really well for 8 years. So we had to tell the body, okay, we don't need that anymore, and let's get rid of it. So once we identified what that was and when it was happening, what was causing it, then it left, and I was able to get pregnant.
And he's how old now?
He is 18.
Right. So we've had a couple of advancements since then,
Yes, a lot.
but the reason I wanted Jody to share that is I've actually had a number of women get pregnant. I tell a funny joke. I was still seeing somebody in Flagstaff, and was an attractive young blonde with a husband that was about 6'9" and about 300 pounds, giant, good guy. And she walked in and she said, I'm pregnant and you're the reason. And he walked in behind her and they looked at him and he goes, and it's all good. So, but same thing. She had a specific self-service receptor blocked. So I think now, because we can combine things, it'd be the same thing. If somebody's got infertility, and you could check the back door. That's what I call the cell surface receptor door. And so if I would have, and I didn't even have that scan with Jody 18 years ago. If I would have said functional healthy fertility factors, oh, test week, how many frequencies? One. How does this enter the body? Ingest, oh, it's an ingestin. Okay. Is this a food? No. Is it a medication? No. Is it a supplement? We could have cleared it. So, you know, yeah, with spike proteins cause inflammation, period. So an inflammatory response causes symptoms, and it does block cell surface receptors. See, that's the thing. The number one pathogen frequency that blocks cell surface receptors is virus. I'd say second is mycoplasma. So you can have old, dead, or live viruses. And an example of that is somebody's on a pain med and they're using it for chronic pain and it quits working. So the doctor just says, well, let's just double the dose. I mean, I've seen them do that with pain patches. I'm blanking on the name of it. You guys will know it. They're fentanyl patches. Yeah. And then you get twice the constipation and it's still not working. Well, what is it? Something blocked it. And if you go in and you say functional healthy fentanyl patches, you're usually going to find like a virus or mycoplasma. You clear it, they don't need the higher dose, the pain meds start working again. So in that same way, if you're not getting pregnant, and you check, you've got the nutrition, are your hormones balanced? Do you have is there something blocking it? You just remove what blocks it. And see, this really comes out of spiritual principles, is that the body was made, the spirit, the body, the soul, the emotions were made to be healthy. You don't put something in the body other than good nutrition and exercise and God's spirit to make it healthy. You remove things that are blocking its health. Well, our medicine has turned that around. Instead of finding out, why do I have muscle cramps on my back, that I go to the chiropractor 3 times a week, I say, oh, I wonder if I need to change my laundry soap. Okay. And that's the same thing, like in Jody's case, do we need to put in a healthy egg and No, we need to find out why the body's not doing what it was designed to do by God. So that's really where we put our emphasis. Why is this not working the way it was divinely created? Even healing, I mean, think about that's a huge issue. You mean I can heal 67 layers in one treatment? Yeah. Oh, I never thought about that. Oh, I never thought to ask. So he didn't tell me because I didn't ask. And it's like that was the way it was designed. It wasn't designed to go really slow and suffer for years and years and years. I don't think that's the way God designed healing. Now, we've designed healing that way, knowingly or unknowingly. And I hate to say it, but so much traditional medicine, they don't really want a cure. They want a treatment where you'll feel better, but come back to them for the rest of your life. I mean, that's how you build a business versus, well, if you just cure people, they're going to go away. Yeah, but they're going to tell 10 other people. I prefer that model. So
I wanted to come back with what we were talking right there, because the reason that the nicotine patches work is because they block the cell surface receptors, not allowing that spike protein to get into the cell. And so that's why it worked so well, and why it was kind of like, oh, we learned that. So anyway, we have 2 questions that came in. It says, does chronic reverse polarity need to be cleared or corrected before starting to clear the miasms and other issues?
Well, you have to clear block you got me saying that polarity before you do anything, because you basically can't even get any answers. So yeah, if you're saying I want to be healthy, I want to be sick, and they're both strong, until you take care of that, you really can't pursue. That's the first thing we always do. And the number one issue with that is you're currently breathing mold or a man-made toxin. A lot
of times, we've said this for years, to do that or step into a different location because of inhaling.
Get hydrated. Many years ago when I was doing this face-to-face in my office psychologist, I had oversized men and women's sweats that were washed in natural laundry soap. If somebody came in that were untestable, they could go put those over their clothing where they weren't breathing it. And a lot of times they'd be testable, so I could help them. But that also helped them see why you shouldn't be wearing that. Yeah.
Yeah. The next question is, says, has your discovery by asking if all layers can be cleared at once inspired you to ask further questions?
Well, I'm always inspired. I'm always inspired to ask new questions every day. So kind of everything that inspires me to ask questions. Why does this work? Why does it not work? How can it work better? So that's kind of who I am. I'm always asking questions.
Yeah, to me, that's what QT is. I mean,
Right,
I'll be walking on the treadmill and go, oh, and it's like
right.
a squirrel, you're off onto a different idea. It's like, well, what about this? And what about that? And so, um, yeah, sometimes I have to like, wait, no, I'm supposed to be praying right now, not, doing QT.
Well,
It's exciting.
I have, when I walk my dog, I have a pen and a tiny notepad because it's
Uh,
sunrise and it's beautiful and I get a lot of information. I take a detox bath. I've got a little notepad and a pen. Why? Because if I don't write it down, I do a lot of things in an altered state. If I don't write it down, something else has to trigger because I won't remember it later, you know. So.
that's
But it's a lot of fun. I mean, it's kind of like you get up every day and I wonder what new toys God's left for me in the toy box to play with today, I work with difficult clients. Well, as we're in that journey, we learn new stuff. We find new toys. And it's a great life. It's a
yeah,
lot of fun.
yeah. Well, we're getting close to the end, and so I just want to let people know that, to clear the spike protein, like I said, it doesn't take very long. It's just a matter of clearing it, and then you're able to, like we talked about, work on clearing the things underneath it that it sometimes hides, like the protozoa and the mycoplasma and the emotions. And so that's kind of the first step. And it helps your body stop having such a cytokine storm. And it's helpful, I think, to kind of write down and say, hey, I'm having issues with this. And maybe these are the things that had led to this, so that you kind of have an idea of what you're working on. So we'd love you
One
to,
other one
yeah,
other
sure.
thing that we don't know for sure, my belief, but that's all it is at this point because we don't have data, is that once we clear these spike proteins when we clear them, obviously we're creating a new pathway. Then when you get re-exposed, because you're going to be out in the public, where people are shedding, and hopefully we can block that from, I'll say, getting stuck in the body again and taking up space. No, we don't know that for sure, but that's what we're working on.
And I don't try to limit my exposure, because I chose
Yeah.
at the very beginning of all this is that I would rather, I found it important to connect and to make sure that, I have that connection, and everything that I've learned in the last, 4 years or so, is that it is about connection and it's staying connected. And that's really kind of almost our purpose, is to not try to disconnect. And so that's really important. And so, yeah, so I haven't limited my life, and I didn't want to live scared. But if I found something that I could help and clear this, then it's just a matter, okay, great, well, you can work on that and take care of it. And that's more freeing than kind of being, hidden and scared. Um, so we'd love to work with you. I'm going to enter my email address, and you can send me an email to work together. So I'm going to copy and paste that if I can. Let's see here. Keeps kind of changing. So, all right. So I've got that. And then if you are wanting me to send you the last YouTube, it's not a YouTube, it's a Rumble video about the spike protein. You can send me an email and I can send you that link. So you have like our first discussion and our second discussion. Also, in between last time and this time, Steve did come up with a spike protein clearing code that it would be helpful. I don't think it sometimes may take the place of clearing it exactly, but it will help you kind of boost your system up. So that's kind of part that we can send you. And so we have quite a few. I think there's like 6 or 7 codes now that we've collected that have been really helpful for people dealing with everything that we've dealt with for the last 4 years. So if you're wanting a copy of those codes, just let me know. Also in an email. And we have many ways of connecting with us. We've got our main YouTube channel. And if you haven't, Steve's been doing a lot of videos on that. I've been doing videos on my own channel, which is Jody Colegrove. And so I'm going to be starting to upload those into the QT. Just got to get in the rhythm after moving to a new state and getting my life back in order. I still feel like I'm camping. So I'm doing just enough to try to get that going. So, and then I do have a Facebook group that really helps you stay connected with answering questions. It's a community, like I said, that connection. So if you're wanting to kind of talk and have a community and things like that, that's why I created that Facebook group. And it's Holistic Health for Christians, and it's tapping, toxins, and trauma. And those are all the things that we kind of deal with as a broader view of quantum techniques, is teaching how to clear toxins, how to get rid of the traumas and the emotions that keep us blocked. And then also, helping people understand what tapping is if you don't know. So those are all things that to connect with. So I'd love you to join the Facebook group. Obviously, also get involved in the YouTube channel, Jody Colegrove and Quantum Techniques. And it looks like we also now have a Rumble channel so that we can add things there if we need to. And I can start building that up eventually. I wanted to do that for years, but I just hadn't had an excuse. And last month we got an excuse. So that's cool. So I want you to discover what that root cause is. What is that spike protein that's keeping you blocked? To clear it so you can get clarity, have energy, and can live in peace. So if you don't have any more questions, appreciate you guys showing up today and having a great discussion, and appreciate your questions. So that really is great. So until next month, we'll see you.
Many blessings. Bye-bye.
Yes, thanks, Steve. I sure appreciate it.
You bet.
Bye, guys. Thank you.